All right, let's try to get started here. Looks like everyone online could hear me. I suppose because there's that 1040, like a different type of session. If I go fast enough, you can run over to something else if you want. I have, I think, 85 slides. I'm on day 12 of some kind of respiratory something or another that's not COVID. So please don't try to talk to me afterwards. It's super awkward when you're like, try to not be the super spreader. But I'm feeling good, relatively speaking. And I'm excited to talk to you guys about Alteryx. First, can I get a show of hands? How many people have used Alteryx before in the room? Okay, so I'm going fairly basic on this. Some of it will definitely be a review for you guys who have used the tool, but I wanted to also make this friendly for someone who has never heard of that word before. So hopefully I can meet both audiences' needs. My co-presenter today will be Dr. Stephen Strange. If you don't know anything about him, he's a fictional doctor, a surgeon who was humbled when he lost the ability to use his hands. And, you know, he had this huge ego and was like the fancy doctor, then became some sorcerer. It's all very bizarre, but I will try to keep him peppered in there every few slides so this doesn't get boring. If you don't know anything about me, I kind of have a similar story to Dr. Strange in that I was a professional poker player before this. So instead of a car accident taking my hands away, it was a midnight writer on an anti-terrorism bill that made online poker illegal in the US in 2006. So I wrote a paper on it in college when it was happening. That is literally how stuff gets done in our government. Pretty fascinating stuff. I'm not salty about it at all. So the agenda is pretty straightforward. Just gonna kind of introduce you to the product. We'll do a walkthrough of a workflow, which is where most of the slides are. I'll try to share some things I wish I knew earlier. And I want to start and end with support because that's a big part of what we do here at ASU is in the enterprise technology office in general is we want to be there for you guys. You go to a lot of other, you know, even Fortune 100 places and everything's outsourced and it's hard to get a hold of people if you're trying to get access to a dashboard. We are lucky right now that we don't have that situation. So please take advantage of that. My teammate Twyla is here as my moderator. She's very helpful. So Stephen, who unfortunately couldn't make it to the conference today, is the product owner for Alteryx. But if you ever see him online, just know that he's the guy who kind of helps decide the vision for the product. And, you know, he's in there trying to make sure we get the most value out of it. It's definitely one of our bigger, actually, I think the biggest thing that Mike Sharkey has to pay for. So we want to make sure that we get good value out of it. We've got Alteryx Designer. That's the app where you make the workflows. Then you have Gallery where you save and schedule them. Right now we have about 200 people using it. We have 250 licenses though. So all those people who didn't raise their hand, you're in luck. There is an opportunity for you to use a license. And we have some future improvements that we want to make to just get even more value out of the product. One thing, if you've never heard of Amazon Workspaces, that's kind of our secure environment to access the data warehouse and use all of our tools. So you'll need that. You'll be able to get the slide deck after if you need these links, but you can also use our Slack channels if you ever don't know what form to fill out. On Workspaces, we don't charge for them. We do show you what the costs are on the form, just to let you know. And we try to be good stewards of ASU dollars by just auto deprovisioning people. If you don't use them in 90 days, we'll just, you know, get rid of it and you can always get it back later. Like I mentioned, Alteryx, pretty significant expense, close to $700,000 a year. We do try to share those costs. This is the first year that we've charged, but we'll always try to work with you if your department can't pony up the money. We'll try to figure something out. So don't let that deter you. It is a really valuable tool if you can use it right. Just any automation tool really can just unlock so much value for the university. So don't be deterred by money. Here we go. As promised, I'll have some gifts and things of Dr. Strange. So I like this one because of the concerned look on the face of, I forgot this actress's name. Whatever he's about to do, she looks very concerned. So hopefully that's not how this presentation goes. But step one is really don't do what I did with this screenshot. This is easily my ugliest Alteryx workflow. If you've used the tool, I'm sure you've made something ugly before. At least I added some documentation in there. Ours will be much more simple than that. We're going for just a really simple input that connects to the data warehouse. And then I want to show you the different ways that you can output things and kind of hopefully explain why you would want to output things in multiple places. So step one, super basic, connect to some data. This actually, Twyla knows from our consultations, can be the biggest hurdle. When you're first starting out, just getting connected to the data warehouse can be an ordeal. But once you're there and you're playing with data, the tool is very fun. So in the data sources tab, you're gonna look for Amazon Redshift and click on ODBC. And of course, Alteryx can connect to many other things, but we're just gonna use the data warehouse for this example. And we're gonna choose our DSN. So that is a data source name that's been kind of prepped for you on the workspace. And that same DSN will work on the Alteryx gallery when you go to save it. And just an update as of 2 weeks ago, I thought the data warehouse was impenetrable. Apparently we brought it down a couple Mondays ago. So that was like a big event in ASU's history that we finally brought down Redshift prod because of an Alteryx workflow. Kind of really don't want to scare you guys with this because all it means is we just need to be better about using QA. So it's kind of a long needed thing that we should change our practices there. And really that's leadership from my team that can help you guys navigate all of that to make sure that we don't, bring down the data warehouse for everybody. We identified the problem, so it's behind us, but you will put in your ASU right and password. This is usually where people hit their first hurdle because they don't realize that they have to set their initial password for the data warehouse. So another caveat there is as we try to use QA more, I will personally try to make sure everyone's accounts are matching between QA and prod, but just know right now that it's kind of the Wild West. There's plenty of people that have access to prod, but not QA, so we can shore that up for you guys. If you get past that and you see this nice pop-up here on the left, that means it worked and you're in. And this pop-up may take a while to grab all the metadata from the warehouse, but once you're in, you are good and off and running. You'll use the visual query builder, or if you know some SQL, you can click on the SQL editor tab, and you can use a dashboard that I built in Tableau called the access check dashboard if you're not sure which of these schemas you can query from. In general, the access that we grant is based on the schema. So if you have access to student data, you'll get ASU student. In this example, we're just going to use a basic directory services table that's open to anyone who has a Redshift account. So you just double click on the table, add it to the white space, and start checking boxes for the columns that you need. If you've used my reports before, that Hyperion Studio product that we've been trying to get away from forever, very similar experience here. You just add a table, click on some boxes. It's all very visual. And this is all before we get into the actual Alteryx canvas. You could do a lot of filtering and stuff here. And this is an important note. And another tough thing in our consultations that we have is when someone is just starting out with the product, and this is true of any querying tool, if you're working with big-ish data, millions of rows, 300 million rows in our workday tables, for example, you could be a beginner, but you start to have to understand some advanced concepts because you're working with such big data that you'll run out of memory if you try to bring it all in. So really, again, reach out to our team if you have any questions when you're first starting out. If you are one of those people who works with finance data, just know that your road will be a little bit harder early on. You just have to understand some concepts before other people, because a lot of the stuff that I work with, 30,000 rows of HR data or something, not a big deal, right? You could do a lot of stuff inefficiently before you even have to worry about optimization. So now we can look at the connection string here. You'll notice we have that DSN that we chose. We have our ID in here. And basically this is going to be packaged up with the workbook when you go to save it to the gallery. So just know that your password's in there. You can always change it if you need to. There are different ways that you can set up these connection strings. We don't need to go into that nuance today, but just know our team can help guide you through that. And you can always request an app ID once it becomes time to like actually schedule stuff to run automatically. We're going to drag in a filter tool now, and just a basic filter to search for the first name Stephen in this directory services table. You can also use the custom filter to do stuff that's more advanced using and or logic. I'm going to add a second one here that also looks for last name Strange to see if there is anyone at ASU named Stephen Strange. This is just for fun, obviously. And we will cache and run the workflow. This is one of those tips that I wish I knew about. It took me, I think, 6 months of using Alteryx before I realized this was a thing. And it could have saved me so much time if I knew about it early. So I want all of you to know right now that this is probably the coolest feature in Alteryx. Basically, you'll only have to query the database once, and it'll store that data in memory for the rest of your session, or rather onto your D drive in your workspace. So now anything with the blue bubble, it just will run super fast from that point onward. So I can go make changes downstream, and I don't have to sit there and wait for it to query the database. It frees up resources on Redshift, all that good stuff. And if you ever need to change it, you can. You'll just lose the cache. So we're going to explore the results. At any point in the workflow, one of the coolest things about Alteryx is you can click on these little anchors and they will give you a row count, and they'll let you kind of explore the data down below. Really important for if you're just kind of new to data, you don't really know how to build queries very well. You can kind of be inefficient, and you can keep just playing around and see what the data looks like at each step. I feel like this is what makes people say Alteryx is fun to use. It's literally just this feature, the fact that you can kind of see at every step what the data is looking like. So we have 2,673 people named Stephen, I guess in the directory table with a PH. And then if we look at the last name, it looks like no one is named Stephen Strange, unfortunately. So Dr. Strange is not currently at ASU. Maybe he has been in the past, I'm not sure. We tried. So we will try to delete that unneeded filter tool now. And again, we can make these downstream changes without losing that data that's in memory right there. Just a really powerful thing to know about. And we've got the nice picture of Dr. Strange running fast now, because the workflow that previously took many seconds to run is now less than a second when we just run it again, because that data is saved to our D drive. So super pro tip there. And now we can just group by to get a count by ACAD prog I'm gonna do for this. I actually don't know that much about the directory services table. So this was a nice experiment to see, someone like me who doesn't really know much about the table, can I use our data dictionary to find out what this data actually means? Because in this table, I believe it's just one row per student and faculty and staff. And maybe you've used this table before, where I assume that people are in multiple progs. Like, how does it handle when a student is in a separate prog? I don't think people go to directory services to do like official counts of students. So I'm just gonna try to explore the data here. Alteryx is an amazing tool for that sort of thing. I'm just gonna add a sort to show the count descending, and I'm going to run the workflow. You'll see engineering undergrad has 133 Stevens in the program, apparently. And you can see the breakdown. You can see that engineering shows up here twice because ACAD progs can be undergrad or grad. So a lot of fun student data nuance that we can learn about, hopefully, if we go to our data dictionary. So little bonus content here, but I wanted to kind of simulate what my normal working life is like with Alteryx. I'm not just using that one tool. I'm bouncing between, Calibra, this other tool called dbeaver. So we're going to use asu.calibra.com. If you haven't heard of it, it's our data dictionary. I'm going to search for that directory services table to learn more about it. And then I'm going to tweak my search to show you that it is a little picky about how you need to search. So now we're getting results here when I add a star before. Josh Johnson is the product owner for Calibra. He could tell you all about it. We have a channel specifically for our data dictionary tool. It's just going to get better and better over time. We have 91 results now, so we can actually click on one of these, or you could filter for a table specifically. And once we get there, we can see the description. So it says student, faculty, staff, and affiliate data by person ID, includes current name, yada, yada. Doesn't actually look like their description. So I was hoping for a description on the ACAD Prog table to kind of understand the nuance of, what happens when someone has more than one ACAD Prog, that sort of thing. Eventually we'll get that in all these major tables. So please be a part of that process. If you ever see a table that's undocumented, just reach out to the community and say, hey, it'd be great if we had, this column explained. I don't really know what this means. We don't want all that knowledge to be trapped in Slack, right? We want it to be centralized in a tool that we pay for in Calibra. So eventually it'll be a really nice tool for you guys to use. For now, only maybe 15% of tables are documented, I believe, but that number is growing every day. So our last change to our filter tool here, we're going to get rid of all the rows that just had a dash as the ACAD Prog, since I don't understand the data, and it's not like this workflow really needs to make that much sense anyway. It's mostly just an example for this presentation, but we're going to add these tools to a container. This is another side note just about something I wish I did early on in my Alteryx career, is adding documentation as I went. It makes it so much nicer for yourself, really, selfishly. Even just a few days after you started working on something, if you get sidetracked and go to something else, having documentation for yourself to know what you were doing so you can pick it up where you left off is really nice. It's just another nuance here that you can change the margin and how these appear to make your containers look nice. So now we have the nice blue background. I would also add a select tool to make sure that you know what your data looks like and what the data types are. So you want dates to be dates, strings to be strings, that sort of thing before you start outputting this other places. And now we're going to actually move some data. So we have an output data tool that you can use. And the first place we're going to move stuff is to what we call the analytics user databases. So unlike the data warehouse, where only the data warehouse team has access, you can request your own schema and you can put whatever you want in this database that's just for you guys. And then you could have your dashboard connect to that. And I do that for almost all of my data projects. So it's been really reliable, really nice. In order to connect to that, you go to PostgreSQL and then ODBC. We have documentation on all this stuff, but here it is in the presentation. And again, we're going to pick a DSN, and it's going to be that AUDB prod write DSN. And again, you will have to set your initial password for this database. It's a separate database. So you need to have write access to whichever schema you're going to choose. Again, you can use the access check dashboard to find out if you have access, and reach out to my team if you hit any hurdles there. Here's where you choose your name. This is another place you could get tripped up because you need to make sure you put your schema in there first. So the schema.table name, and you can always change that later. But here you go. This is what your AUDB output looks like. So you're creating a new table here. You'll later change this to overwrite or maybe append or update depending on what you want to do. Just recently, I was working on a workflow where we have to append rows every week because the database that we're reading from only captures 2 weeks worth of data. So we want to start building a history of, I guess this is very meta, of Alteryx gallery workflow run history. So we're trying to be good about reporting on how healthy your workflows are. And I think I'll present on that later this afternoon. our new analytics health dashboard was made with Alteryx, which I suppose, now that I think about it, if Alteryx Gallery is down and that workflow fails, then you won't get to know about Alteryx Gallery. So there are some challenges there, but that's what we navigate every day. So we're used to it. One down, four to go. We'll drag in another output data tool. So this is FSX is something that we increasingly want to push. And it's just simply a place to store files. So we've used SharePoint in the past. You could still use it, but we definitely like FSX. It just seems to be more seamless in that both the gallery and your workspace can connect directly to it, and it can read and write to that location without us having to do any kind of magic like we have to do with SharePoint. So definitely recommend if your folks just want their data in Excel, even if you have a dashboard, and this is the crux of the presentation, there are so many times where you could have the most amazing dashboard in the world, but all anyone wants to do is just export it to Excel, right? We've all been there. And giving them the data beforehand, before they even ask, in Excel and in your Tableau dashboard, and it's all the same workflow that's generating that is really powerful. So we're going to set up our output here. You click on select file. On this files tab is the nuance, and then you start typing in your share. And if you don't have a share, we can figure out how to get you one, or just a folder in our share. Managing permissions can be tricky. I've seen some mistakes made already where people have been exposing data places that they probably shouldn't. But our team knows by now how to do all of this, and never hurts to ask us. So if you're not sure, if you just want us to double check how your FSX share is set up, we're happy to do that. And then you are done. You have Alteryx Gallery needing permission, so there's some more nuance. Firewalls need to be open. All of that is pretty easy to get squared away. I think Jenna just went through that recently. And yeah, unfortunately, we're part of the learning process for us, so it's going to be easier for the next person. But we can go to our third output here, Google Sheets. If you want to just put something out there in Google, a really nice benefit of Google Sheets is how you can take stakeholders and actually have them interact with the Google Sheet, add comments, change your data. I know Kristen Kennedy made a really cool solution with the training data at ASU. So, sexual harassment or FERPA training, any of that is all in one dashboard. And anytime a new Canvas course comes out, she has an Alteryx workflow that outputs records to Google. And then the stakeholders can decide, do we want this course on the dashboard or not? They tick a box, and that becomes the Tableau dashboard results. So there's a lot you can do there, or you can just simply have that be your way to share data with people. Just everyone knows how to use a Google Sheet, obviously. You set it up by clicking connect and logging in. You'll get these screens here. It's pretty straightforward. And then you can have it, again, append or overwrite. We call it destructively loading. If you overwrite, it's just going to be whatever the latest data is in the Google Sheet every day. And I highly recommend when you're doing this to kind of capture what the configuration is of the Google Sheets, because you can lose this. If you get signed out of your tool here, it won't readily tell you what the configuration was unless you go to digging through the XML of the Alteryx file. So I would just make it easier on yourself and your teammates by putting that there. This is one thing that always trips me up, is the sheet tabs at the bottom of the Google Sheets being called sheets within a Google Sheet. I'll never understand that. If you drag in a table and report text tool from the reporting tab, we can start having our fourth output, which is sending emails to people. So Alteryx is great for this. It helped get us through COVID in that I was sending out emails to all the executives with the list of the people who filled out their health check or didn't fill out their health check. We're also sending emails to the athletics coaches, making sure that their student athletes were doing their health checks. So we've used this for a lot of purposes before. This tool is pretty easy to use. It's just taking those 2,673 Stevens and grouping them into one table. And I recommend verifying how many rows you're getting out of that tool just so you understand how it works. But right now we're going to disable our other outputs before we run this and test it. And you'll see that we get one row here instead of that 2,673. And if we were to use the group by, would you get 32 rows? And the nuance to using these email tools in Alteryx is that every row that you feed into it, you're going to trigger an additional email. That may be something you actually want to do if you want to send out only the data that each school cares about, for example. You could do that dynamically. Our team can help you if you've never done that before. And then the report text tool is the next one. That's where you have the message to your team or whoever you're sending the email to, and then you can decide if the table goes above or below it. And then you add your, the most dangerous tool in Alteryx, the email tool. Again, I would always test with your own email before you start using this, because I've done it before. I think I sent myself like 5,000 emails. You'd rather have that go to yourself before you did that and spam 5,000 emails to Dr. Crow, for example. I'm sure we've all made an email mistake before, but just know, like, this isn't just Alteryx. Any of our reporting tools, anything that can automate anything is going to be dangerous by nature, right? We had one incident, not with Alteryx, but with Report Builder, where someone, luckily they caught it early, started going through the entire list of 4 million people in the PS ASU D person view table and emailed them, starting with people who were back at ASU in the 80s, just their date of birth and their first and last name, I think. So that's all that was in the email, just like 3 things. And it was their own information. But that was the first time I was on a call with a lawyer, like, is this, FERPA violation? Every tool that we have could, potentially do that. So I don't want to scare you, obviously. It's just, you got to know what you're doing before you go live, essentially. So again, we're happy to help you with anything to sanity check, anything that you guys build. But that's what you have to do when you want to move fast and have this decentralized kind of reporting community. You just have to be willing to make mistakes occasionally. So configuring this tool is pretty straightforward. You can see I'm testing here with my own email address, and we got some important information. DLs, if you want to send to a DL, just know that it's going to bounce back unless that DL is configured to accept emails from non-ASU addresses. And let's see. This is what it looks like in the body. So it's a pretty nice little formatted thing. And that's it for email. We have one left. How are we doing on time? 10:30, perfect. All right, might be able to let you out of here early. We've got summarize and formula tools. So my favorite is we're going to output to Slack. And you can do that pretty simply. The hard part is setting up the webhook for your Slack channel, because you need a Slack app that can actually send the message. But right now, all I'm going to do is make a message that says, here's how many Stevens we have at ASU. So I want to do a count. The count records tool can do that for you. We're just prepping a message. So it's going to want this JSON format. And if you don't know what that is, you can click on this link. But it's pretty straightforward. It wants this text name here, and then the value of what you're actually going to send. And when you see the plus sign and this formula, that's just me concatenating the count as a string so that it's just one big sentence. There are 2,673 Stevens at ASU. And then my favorite part is the fact that you can put emojis in your Slack message. So we're going to see this little guy. And for sure, that's, I think, one of the coolest things that makes me feel like I'm using a modern tool. You're hitting an API to send a Slack message to a channel in an automated way, and you can make it as fun as you want with links and everything. So adding your channel's webhook, there's definitely a whole process to this. Once you get set up once, though, you can just keep reusing it. So it's just some initial pain to try to navigate, and we can help you with that. And then I would keep your webhook safe, since anyone who has this could theoretically go post anything they want to your channel. So don't use it in a presentation slide like I'm doing here. although it's cut off, so I guess I'm securing it a little bit. The last tool to output to Slack is a download tool, kind of counterintuitive, but really the download tool lets you interact with APIs. So you can either make GET requests to pull data in, or you can use a post to send data to Slack. And that's what we're doing here, obviously. So I kind of go through and show you how to set that up. You're not really doing too much here. We're just posting, and we're using that JSON field. And we don't have to mess around with the connection tab again, because the webhook it has the credentials effectively in it. And boom, there is the test. So this is actually, I forgot I filtered out all those Stevens who didn't have an ACAD prog. So we're down to 612 records here. And again, I always recommend using a test channel. You want to test before you go spam it out to some other channel that is more widely used. Has anyone used Alteryx to send a Slack message? Two? Awesome. I would love at some point for us to do this data conference and the 10th iteration or whatever, and like everyone's using Alteryx to send Slack messages. I feel like it's an underused feature for sure. You don't have to go crazy like I did here with all of these metrics, but I just wanted to show what you could do. This was our little internal health check channel. I'm sure you guys had your password expired at some point, maybe by mistake. Basically, whenever we saw this number spike to 6,000, I knew we were going to get flooded with support tickets. We were going to have very disgruntled faculty that we're going to have to respond to. Not communicating that you had to do a health check on a holiday, that was a big deal. People really, really hated that. Like after MLK Day, they came back to work and their password was expired. So this at least let us know internally that we just expired 6,000 passwords. So this would run at 3:15. We'd expire the passwords at 3 o'clock. We also had some analytics on preventing this from happening. Once it happened a couple times, we were like, wait, let's do sanity checks at 12 o'clock before we actually expire passwords. But I like that I could link to my coworker's dashboard and help advertise it. My coworker, Zach, made a nice dashboard. Just stick that in the Slack message and people have an easy link there. So here we are. Your input, of course, is probably going to be a little more complicated, but the emphasis of this is on a lot of my projects now look somewhat like this, where you have multiple outputs. I'm not always firing off emails to everybody, but there's almost always something about the workflow that I want to notify my team about if something goes wrong. And this could be, not something going wrong. This could be a positive thing, like, hey, we met this threshold of a goal that we set for ourselves for enrollment, or whatever it is, whatever metric you want. The beauty of Alteryx is that any of these little anchors, you could have it go send an email based on some number or anything really. And that is a really fun feature. And then same deal with Slack. Hey, we hit our enrollment metric, or hey, we're this far behind. You could just have at whatever cadence you want. It could be a different cadence than all these other tools. You could say, let's just ping the Slack channel monthly and add some logic in a formula tool that says, hey, wait until it's this day of the month to send this message. But yeah, pretty straightforward. I hope I didn't go through it too fast or too slow for those of you who have used this before. But that was it. It takes 70 or so slides to explain, but I hope we're good. I'm just going to go into some bonus stuff here about optimization. When we first brought in that initial table, we could have, pre-filtered it. So something simple like criteria equals Steven would have replaced that formula tool. There are pros and cons of doing it in here versus on the canvas. It's a little easier to see when it's on the canvas. But this will definitely cut down your runtime because we're filtering for Steven against the database before we bring those 1.4 million rows back. That's going to dramatically improve our runtime. So you want to make those decisions as you get more confident with Alteryx, and our team again can help you with that. Setting up email alerts, highly recommend this. If you have any Alteryx job that is scheduled to run automatically, you want to know when it fails. My team is going to have better reporting to notify you guys when your stuff is failing. we already have the data. So it's just a matter of getting some kind of organized email worked out. But you can set up these events to yourself to notify your team when something fails. My team has pretty good visibility into all of my jobs anyway, just because I went through and set up all of these alerts. So I like to say exactly what the workflow is, what table it affects, what dashboard hits that table, so people know what the impact is. Like, hey, this dashboard's not going to be, it's going to have stale data until someone goes and fixes this. So one of my last slides here, you don't have to use Alteryx for everything or for anything. It's definitely one of those tools where if they just jack up the price 3 years from now, there's a possibility that we can't justify renewing it. And of course, there are many options out there. So not every project will make sense for Alteryx. It's in many situations, it'll just be this crazy big hammer where you just needed something finer. But at the same time, it is so fun to use. I recommend at least trying it while we have the licenses, and you can always just stop using it. But yeah, book a consultation with us, see how you could use it for your department, and we'll share some ideas. When you're first starting out, it can be intimidating like any other tool. But once you get over that initial hurdle, it's pretty fun to use. You can visit our training catalog, where if you filter by Alteryx, you'll get a bunch of stuff there. Hopefully this presentation will make it there. And our Slack channels, I recommend just joining all of these. If you're in a session that shows you're interested in Alteryx, you're probably going to be interested in most of these. And then knowing how to reach out to our team via that Ask Analytics is really big. Any questions? Which is our fault, for sure. We are the team that's supposed to try to educate you guys on that. That is our non-prod data warehouse. We have ASU DW Dev as well, but that's definitely going to have very small amounts of data in it. QA is not going to be a perfect like it used to be, where it was 2 days behind. I'm not sure how often they refresh it, but it'll have enough to get a decent idea of if your workflow is working. Yeah, you can check the timestamps in the table to see how timely your data is in QA. But unless the community demands it, I don't think they plan on doing what they used to do with Oracle, which was data warehouse is 1 day behind. The PM QA was 2 days behind. So, but for sure, it's a little more tedious to go in and change your connections. But once you get in the habit of doing that, hopefully you'll feel pride in knowing that you're doing the right IT thing that you're supposed to do that we've been avoiding for so many years. But yeah, thank you for asking. Anything else? All right, I don't see anything online. I think we're good to finish. So if you want to hop over to another session, feel free right now. It's 10:43. So we appreciate you guys joining. Thank you so much.